So then the next obvious question is, who would win in a fight, you or Sir Tim Berners-Lee?
I feel like he'd roll deeper, probably. There's more people that would like help him out, but probably he would win.
I mean, he's a knight, so he has to win, right? Welcome, Fedi Friends, to episode 44 of Fireside Fedi. I'm your host, Ozoned. Fireside Fedi is a show about folks within the Fediverse. If you're seeing this, you are part of the Fediverse. With me today is Ben Goering, which, if I mispronounce it, please tell me, Ben. Okay. Ben is a software developer, volunteers with the W3C. If you don't know the WC3, it is the Worldwide Consortium. He's specifically interested, or volunteers, at least at the moment, with Social Web Working Group. While Ben has worked on many projects, he's currently working on wallet attached storage as well as other ActivityPub projects. Interestingly enough, Ben seems to dip his toes anywhere he seems interested. He's had multiple different videos on how simple things work, like all of ActivityPub. And I'll include a lot of links down below, especially some that point to some of Ben's presentations on things such as Activity Stream, which is well over my head. But Ben, welcome to Fireside Fedi, and how would you like to be addressed? Wait, we can't hear Ben. Why can't we hear Ben? Try that.
Can you hear me now?
There we go. Okay.
Okay, so yeah, nice to be here. Nice that this is finally happening, and you can call me Ben, Go. If you need to use pronouns, they, them is preferred.
Okay. Well, welcome, Ben. And as usual, we start with, how did you get to where you're at today?
That's like a long story, but I think with regard to the Fediverse, basically, before it was even a standard at W3C, there was some sort of different community projects around activity streams around like the 2010, 2011 era. I was like beginning of my career working at a startup in San Francisco that was doing a lot of social data, like slicing and dicing, and activity streams was like the perfect thing we needed at the time for normalizing social data. And so I just became an implementer at a really early phase, and eventually that led to like the work going to W3C and into Mastodon, and now like where we are today. So it's just been following breadcrumbs for 15 years on making social software and mixing it together in a coherent way.
But one of the things that I love in one of the videos that you talked about, I believe is the Aaron Schwartz day, is you initially started talking about RSS. And this was, you could tell me the time, it sounded like it was early to mid 2000s, I think it was.
Absolutely. So yeah, I think like Aaron got involved with RSS site summaries more like 2001, 2002, 2003 era. And I started programming in kind of like probably like 2004, 2005 era. So I think you're referring to a talk I gave in 2022 at the Internet Archive on Aaron Schwartz Day. That was kind of like a riff on a talk I'd been giving that year. That was the 15-year history of Web 3.0 social and sort of activity streams, but specifically RSS and Aaron's like influence on it. And so as a teenager, before I was actually out here in San Francisco, working in San Francisco, I was blogging about Xboxes in like the 2005 era and learning about how blogging worked, RSS worked, podcasting was new, and like I was making a podcast back then. So that's one of the ways I learned programming was through video games, but like media production. And then once I started my career, I was really excited to work on something that was like a comment system for blogs, since that's sort of how I learned to program. So that talk touches a little bit more on what I was doing in high school and has some like embarrassing pictures of me. But just showing how like that was a way that I got into, and I think other people can get into the more complicated parts of the internet, is just like making fun websites and then learning how things like OpenID or OAuth work. It's kind of how I
Well, and that's the kind of thing that caught me, which I feel like we've moved a lot away from with these walled gardens, is you got involved in an RSS group, right? And you just would find technologies you were interested in and you would just you just grab their RSS and you just start consuming it because you found it fun and wanted to do it. And the immense power, do you think you would have been able to accomplish what you had without open communications like RSS and mailing lists and those kinds of things?
I definitely would have been in a different place. But yeah, I definitely came home from school. I learned what I learned at school, and I would come home and flip through my RSS reader like 1,000 items a day. And that was like a great way of learning things that they weren't necessarily going to teach me at school in Kansas. And then honestly, like I wonder sometimes, was that just a window that we only had for a little bit? Because even after a few years of back then, like 15, 20 years ago, those RSS feeds started getting less useful. You started having like feed burner injecting ads in them. And I think in general, I've always been fascinated about like what is the balance between the open data potential, but the really real business needs that publishers of this information have, and how are they going to monetize its production?
Right.
Because they'll do it in unintended ways, like by injecting ads into the RSS feeds, for example, in a way that like then we don't even have very parsable RSS feeds. So I think that tension is something I'm really interested in, is like getting the benefits of open data, but how do we also make this sustainable and something that the publishers are going to participate in without
And,
working off and doing their own thing.
and it seems like you have been drawn to those kinds of open technologies and open conversations again because do you feel that that's a huge part of you because you were on RSS and now you kind of found activity streams and you're contributing different ways to activitypub, you are building other technologies to allow this kind of open ecosystem, open environment. Do you feel that that is a core part of you?
I don't think it would be healthy if I did, frankly. Like I think it's healthy to not
Okay.
identify with these things, like these like internet projects, right? Like they're not. What is it like? There's value in having the wisdom to know the difference in between what you can control and what you can't. There's some prayer.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, but I do think it's really cool. I think it's been really fruitful, like place to like experiment and learn from other people that are like a lot older than me. I didn't have to pay tuition to learn a lot of the things that you can learn while participating in these standards groups and like experimenting on how we design this stuff. So I think it's a thing I'm really grateful for. I think more people should participate in, and then at the same time, I try not to identify with it too much. Like at some point, it may not be a good fit anymore. So,
Well, I mean, oh, sorry. Gosh. Hey.
and I would say like yeah, you feel free to.
You're okay. You're okay. Good job. You kept us all safe from the people doing yard work. Okay. Go ahead. Go girl. All right. Sorry. My dog sees someone at a neighbor's house. No, it's interesting take. I think it is a positive way to look at it because we all get so, especially in these kinds of areas, emotional when it comes to technological decisions of things. Like I love Mastodon and they just picked the wrong thing. So my love for Mastodon is less. Like it is technology. You can love it. It's not going to love you back. But as we were describing, as we were talking about before the show, there's a million ways to do any one thing. And that's why I didn't know if kind of like an open environment and open ecosystem was something you enjoyed, which it sounds as much more pragmatic than that.
I do, yeah. I think I'm just like also cautious around any. You could have an ecosystem that's very open, and then once it gets successful, its openness changes, and at some point, people should choose openness over the ecosystem that used to be open but no longer is. And so,
Okay.
I think people should, choose the values, but not necessarily be overly attached to any one institution or protocol, because those are subject to capture, but the underlying principles and design goals like are more permanent.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. At any, especially with, as you said, we've seen technologies that were intended to be open originally and then decided to kind of shift their focus. And people will justify any way whatsoever, like, oh, well, it's okay if I inject ads because I need to make money for my project, which everyone finds important, right? So that's the distinction for you. Is that kind of why you like to dabble in different kinds of projects?
Yeah, and like frankly, there's a lot that we did in the social web working group, which ended in 2018, but produced the ActivityPub standard. And nowadays, a lot of the activity has been in the community group, which anyone watching can get involved with. And there's a lot that some of us were trying to work on in the working group leading up to 2018 that didn't make its way into the final standard, and also hasn't necessarily made its way into the implementations out there like Mastodon or PeerTube or any software that wants to implement or like primarily interact with Mastodon. So in a lot of ways, it feels like the job's not done. So like, for example, the candidate recommendation of ActivityPub had some different recommendations on how to do authorization, authentication in a standard way that the group failed to come to like agree on for the final spec. Frankly, there was a lot of like cryptography standardization that has had to happen since then in the last 5 or 6 years at IETF and a W3C that's now done, but it wasn't really ready at the time back then, so we had to cut it. And so frankly, one of the reasons I dabble in this other stuff is we have ActivityPub, which is great as of 2018. There's a lot of unfinished stuff that we hoped would make it in ActivityPub and still isn't there, that, you know, is like unfinished business. I'm trying to like proof of concept out and see if we can finish. So
well, and it's interesting.
Make it better, you know.
That's an interesting point, right? Because we've heard time and time again that like, yes, these systems are really good, but one of the main missing pieces that we need is some kind of central authorization, because having to go to Mastodon to auth or PeerTube to auth or loops to auth all separately, we all agree that that's not as closely knit into ActivityPub as we would want. The idea is you should be able to log in once and have each of your applications reflect that, right?
That's definitely what I want. And yeah, like I kind of want to probably have a little bit even more control over like my identity, my identifier online, my profile online, and take that to different online social communities. Where and so like, when we were designing this thing, I think a lot of us envisioned the social server being a little bit separate, at least logically, from the identity server. And then it's totally reasonable. I didn't expect it to be this popular, but Mastodon ships kind of both in the same piece of software. And so every Mastodon instance is sort of both an identity server and a social server. Whereas I'm always trying to find ways of teasing those apart. So maybe I can run my own identity server, or nowadays people are using more like identity wallets, which we can talk more about. There's a European identity law that's really starting to encourage the adoption of identity wallets in Europe. So maybe there won't even be an identity server. We'll have identity wallets, but we should be able to take those to different social servers. And we can't do that if all the social servers are trying to also be identity servers. And the security properties are really different if the cryptographic keys or point of authenticity is the server versus like a device in the user's control. And I would like to see more of our, you know, Fediverse server operators not trying to be the identity provider and letting people bring their own identity to their forum. That way we get like a single sign-on experience. Like I think a lot of people.
Yeah. And I think we can all, I think we can all agree with that. Sir Tim Berners-Lee had started Solid, right? And they had Solid pods. And now they actually have activity pods, which kinds of branches that. And I remember you and I had talked about it a while ago, the differentiation between something like a Solid pod and what you're talking about. Do you want to, or let's actually talk about wallet attached storage first, because it's interesting that you're defining that as kind of a more of an identification wallet. Whenever I think of wallet, like the primary thing in my wallet is money and finances and things like that.
Which then driver's license, right?
Yeah, you do have a driver's license. Yeah.
So when you go to a bar, you usually pull out your wallet or
right.
or a concert or something. And like, I totally agree. There's financial stuff, and I've worked in crypto enough where like I feel like there's at least 2 different industries that talk different things about wallets. And there's like the finance oriented, and then there's a separate world that's working on like, you know, authoritative issuers of identity like the government, and like they need to kind of meet in the middle somewhere.
Right.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I
No, no,
also
no, no,
want to
no.
plug the driver's license use case.
Yeah, no, but that's and that's an interesting point because we are talking about in this instance we are talking about um, authentication in a wallet, in a digital wallet that you could take with you based on standards that Europe is very interested in, and I believe California is very interested in, right?
And yeah, and even in Washington D.C., there's been some pretty good investment in the decentralized identifier web standard, which got advanced to technical recommendation like final standard at W3C 2 or 3 years ago. It was sort of, some people wanted to block it, but then Tim Berners-Lee like overruled the block. And yeah, a lot of the high level projects I work on tend to be how do we bring the benefits of decentralized identifiers to ActivityPub, which frankly Blue Sky's done and AppProto have done a very good job of because they have used DIDs by way of DID PLC. I want to see the rest of the Fediverse and the rest of the ActivityPub universe like get the benefits of this DID technology.
Right. Right. And that's regardless of whether you like Blue Sky or you don't like Blue Sky, I think because at least at the moment, and I think the fear of not liking Blue Sky is the whole piece that we were talking about of it's an open platform right now. If it starts to get big enough, could they close it off? I think that's the worry, right? We've seen it before. We don't want to see it again, but we all have something that we can learn from each other. And I've heard a lot about how AT Proto handles authentication, authorization kinds of stuff. And is that your primary kind of item that you're looking at? Is that your reference model, or are you looking at something else for this?
So in wallet attached storage, like it's a new protocol. It's a client server storage protocol. That would be a standard way that digital wallets could, which host information. If those digital wallets do want to share information with the rest of the internet, it's a standard way they could put that information on a server, configure, tell that server who's allowed to read it, and then send a link to it. You can't send a link to data wallets in your wallet, but if you put it in a wallet storage location, now you can share it with consent. And by design, we're using DIDs as the way that devices identify themselves to the server. So yeah, we're like that is kind of built into what we're doing. And we're also using a draft standard from the W3C credentials community group called ZCAP-LD. One of the editors of that is Christine Weber, who was also the editor of ActivityPub. She just went to work on it after the ActivityPub standard was done. And so whereas DIDs help with the identifier part, they also let you make digital like signed statements as that identity. And we're basically using the CCAP standard as a way of representing permissions and signed statements about who can do what, that you can like potentially apply to social media. Like I gave you an explicit permission slip that you're allowed to slide into my DMs, but some rando, unless they have that permission slip, can't message me unless they have like proof of consent. Whereas right now we don't have like very good granular certificates for those kinds of permissions. Christine envisioned how that could maybe help something like the Fediverse. We're trying to finish that in the context of wallet storage using the exact same standards Christine helped make. And if we can get it working for some of these use cases around sharing sort of boring data from your wallet, like we're focusing on, then that might be a good proof of concept that we can start to use this identification scheme, this authentication scheme, this authorization scheme, not just for backing up like identity credentials in your wallet, but maybe for other social media use cases like Christine decided. So that's like a high level overview of I know it's a lot of jargon, but the layers and the different steps.
I love how that was a high level, and I'm just like, I'm too dumb to understand this. This is going to be a very technical episode, but
I would say like we don't have to go in the weeds, but the main point is like ActivityPub and the social web working group largely failed to make a standard that included authentication authorization that would really let a lot of interoperability happen across software, not just across the same implementation of software. And so I think we're trying to make a standard that has authentication and authorization built in, unlike we were able to do with ActivityPub.
So from wallet.storage, which you gave me the link for this, I'm going to read the blurb you have at the top, if you're okay with that.
Sure.
And if there's any updates, let us know. But so you have what are digital wallets even? Wallet storage is for digital wallets. But wait, what are digital wallets even? According to the California State Digital ID Framework, a digital wallet is a secure space on your electronic device that stores sensitive digital artifacts. Digital wallet interfaces vary. Some are built into the native software of digital devices, while others are housed in a mobile or web-based application. Any kind of digital wallet may play a role in the interactions that make up the digital ID ecosystem. And it goes on, and it includes all the different artifacts that you would consider inside of that. So first, I guess DID is digital identifier.
Or just, yeah, decentralized identifier, but
Decentralized identifier. Okay.
And there's a lot of debates about like, when is this really decentralized or not? But I think the main takeaway for everyday people is like digital identifier, or your like identifiers for you online.
So, and to kind of narrow the focus, or maybe I'm not fully understanding, right now people have, I don't use it, right? But on your phone, a lot of people use a wallet that has like their credit card on it, and you can use NFC to tap and pay. Again, that's not exactly the focus of this, right? This is more a general, again, not state sponsored, that sounds terrible, but a government sponsored move to actually codify how our digital identities exist online.
Right, and ideally we would want you have choice of your digital wallet, not only the one that your phone manufacturer like forces you to use, but you as a consumer should be able to choose from an ecosystem of wallet providers to get things done. Now, the mobile OS manufacturers are also shipping wallets with their operating system, and that adds to some confusion here with the metaphors. But specifically with standard wallets, we're trying to provide a definition of an identity wallet that's a standard, not just the ones made by whoever makes your phone. And frankly, already the mobile operating system manufacturers are starting to have their wallets interoperate with other wallets via standard credential formats, standard identities, like we're talking about. So, for example, the California DMV, where I live in California, has made like an open source wallet app that you can read the code for, and uses the W3C verifiable credentials to represent your driver's license, as I understand it. So each state and or nonprofits within a state in the US may need to choose how they adopt this in the actual DMV. But at least California is kind of showing how that could be done and how other states could do it. And there's similar efforts in the European Union amongst the member states, where every state is coming up with their own digital wallet right now.
So then this brings up, again, we all agree that we should have a standard way for us to bring us with us through life. Computers aren't going away. The internet's not going away. Social media is not going away. And a lot of websites now are forced to verify age and things like that. And I'm assuming that this could be handled to do that. But then the question, I have multiple questions that bring in, how do you prevent someone, how does someone protect their wallet ID? Like if I have it on my local computer, right, like it goes away. If I have it out on a server, it could still go away. If I store it in a wallet provider, I'm assuming they do the right thing, but we've seen time and time again, these companies are all hacked, which then, so how do you protect yourself? How do you verify, and how do you prevent abuse of something like this? Say a government, and I know there's a lot of questions I'm throwing at you, but I find this absolutely fascinating. But how do you prevent a government saying, no, you have to house your wallet with us, and now we can actually see everything that you've done with that?
Yeah, that is a hard one. Like maybe we could start smaller and be like, how do you prevent your current Fediverse host from not making statements on your behalf that you didn't really make?
Okay.
Or reading your DMs. Like, I think we already have this threat, like at a much smaller scale as a threat model right now, where whether through malice or incompetence or like coercion, we're like really putting a lot of trust in our Fediverse hosts and potentially giving them more power than they even want, like to make statements on our behalf or delete or read our messages. We may not be able, it may be impossible to solve this at like the nation state level, but the best thing we can do other than that is just make sure everyday people have a lot of options, even other than their government. But they don't have a lot of options, right? Like right now, the options they have are like Mastodon, App Proto, right, and some of these centralized social networks. So we want to create this kind of identity and wallet ecosystem and teach people how to use it so that many people can make different wallet apps. They can either make their own or use one that their people they do trust make, and they never find themselves in a position of only having like the government as an option or 2 or 3 companies as an option, which can sometimes be even less regulated and more worse, frankly, or at least as bad, or like it has different ways that can go wrong. You should be able to make your own wallet app and take that to your social network.
Yes. Yeah.
But right now, that's not really possible with Mastodon or Peer2.
How would these companies make money?
I'm not necessarily.
Yeah, that's the hard one. We all wonder, right? Like,
I think that there are. Let's see. I currently pay, for example, Google money to keep my enterprise identity stuff secure in the context of business.
Oh, okay.
Right? Like that's generally what like every company pays multiple software vendors for identity and groupware management, whether it's G Suite or Azure or anything. Like most people don't run their own LDAP servers anymore.
Right. Yeah, that's literally where I was gonna go. Yeah.
Amazon. But then frankly, having wrangled this from inside of an organization, now you have like 3 different vendors, each of which is managing or is like representing your team's identity as with its own way. It's hard to stitch these things together, even for an enterprise. Right. I don't know necessarily. Can't say I necessarily like have the business model for this. I'm not convinced that what's best for everyday people is to use a for-profit identity vendor versus to use like someone they trust, or either a nonprofit, a friend themselves, or something like starting to emerge around like local data co-ops, like local data trusts that might opt into like regulation beyond just being a for-profit business, and might even get subsidies or grants to operate this not-for-profit. Well, that's personally the world I think some people want to see is everyday people having their digital identity stewarded by a not-for-profit structure versus what we've been doing the last 15 years. With for-profits.
It's interesting because you and I were just talking about, not to plug my own thing, but also my show, so I'll do what I want. But we were talking about BT Free, the nonprofit that I started, and like my idea is, and I'm with you. I'm kind of playing the devil's advocate with all of this, right? Where I see this kind of at like the Proton Mail, where you pay so much per month, and then now you get email. Oh, now you get calendar, and now you get chat, and now you get all these other things. Like it does not cost as much money as big tech would like you to believe, but they have to make line go up. Right. And if anything, it's become more cost effective and easier to run all of this stuff yourself. So like I am envisioning that we have a platform of a whole bunch of different stuff. You donate whatever per month, and oh yeah, you get so much storage in PeerTube. And and by the way, now we can actually do your authentication, right? We can manage that for you, and that's bundled into that price or whatever.
Yeah, right now we kind of have it so like not only is our social server, like my Mastodon instance, for example, also my identity server, but we also only sort of have like one identity server at a time, and we could change that too. Like if the root of identity is actually a digital wallet that I can create an identity and sign things with it completely disconnected from the internet, and the root of integrity and authenticity is my wallet, not any one instance or host or server.
Right.
Then I can actually put that data even ephemerally to multiple servers to make it easy to find. But if any one of them goes down or is corrupted, I'm still fine because I wasn't relying on that server to be the source of all authenticity.
The source of truth. Right.
I want to see a world where we end up having these identities that are not bound to any one domain name, like we have now on the Fediverse, that maybe have kind of what a DID PLC looks like. It has like a big ugly random number in there because it's a hash of something. We want to have these identities that are actually like unique long random numbers, but we make them easy to find by domain name by putting them in storage locations where people can find them. But if any one of those like name registries goes down, you don't have to start from scratch. You don't have to like export your data from that one place that your identity was. That was just one of the places that you were making yourself easy to find, but you always control your identity on your
Well,
phone.
and right now, for those not fully understanding, which it's a very new, interesting concept. I feel like that is trying to gain traction. But if we think back to the way that big tech does it, whenever you go to a website now, it's like log in with your Facebook, your Google, your X, your GitHub, your Microsoft. Like pick one, you press the button, and it goes out and authenticates you. This would bring that together, right? And in theory, you log in once, and then anything that you go give access to, you don't have to log in again. You don't have to control a unique username and password for 50 different sites.
Yeah, I think there's two new. This is like a really good way of making this real. Like we all log into stuff every day. A lot of times we go to log in, and there's this thing called the NASCAR problem. Whereas we see a lot of, do you want to log in with this website or log in with this website?
Yeah.
Like 16 different choices, like all the ads on a NASCAR race car, and none of them are really like that privacy preserving. And so for a while now, people have been saying, okay, like, OAuth is great, but it kind of is just leading to this NASCAR problem where there's all these server like identity providers that implement OAuth, and you can just choose between only them. I think what several years ago, or frankly 10 years ago, and we were talking about this in the working group, OpenID Foundation was working on a thing called OpenID Connect, which is really good. I think Mastodon integrates with OpenID Connect servers as a relying party. It'd be great if it was also like, if it implemented it from the other side. But they defined a way that I would like to see more of, where there could be a button that's like log in with OpenID, and you would.
Right.
That's how literally 15 years ago I got that a lot of this worked, and you would type your own domain name, and it would like log in using your domain name. The problem is not everyone has a domain name, and so this OpenID Connect feature that I think people are starting to use more, called self-issued OpenID providers, envision a world where there might be a button that's just like log in with OpenID. But instead of typing your domain name, because you probably don't have one, the link that you click would be like OpenID : blah, blah, blah. And so then when you click it, just like when you click a mail to link in a web page, it opens your email app, it would open your OpenID app, which is kind of like what we now call a wallet. And that way you could use your operating system to choose whatever app you want to be your authenticator. The user chooses their authenticator, not the website operator who's choosing that you have to log in through like Google or Facebook. That should be something that we configure our user agents in our operating systems to do. It shouldn't be something that the website operator chooses on our behalf. That's like a fundamental shift. And we have this for email links. We just don't have this for login links.
And again, we were talking before the show on like everyone thinks that this stuff should be so easy. And just talking about a decentralized authentication is what we're talking about. We've already spent a half hour, and I barely understand what the hell we're talking about still, but it's complex because again, we're not trying to be centralized. If it was centralized, if we agreed that Europe, the EU was going to control it, a lot of countries don't want that. A lot of countries don't want big tech. We're seeing the pushback of those things, but because of the decentralized nature and how difficult authentication and authorization actually is when you start to even skim the surface, you have a lot of outliers and security constraints, and like this is massive. How long have you been working on this?
I mean, too long, 15 years. I feel like even as a teenager, you start hacking WordPress and stuff, and you get into building like how do people log into the comment system. So like this is just like identity on the internet. I feel like every web developer gets into this in year one. For me, it's been 20 years, I guess.
Okay. So and coming back to the question,
I will say at the same time, like it kind of seem like there's a lot of if we could sort it out and work out a system that served enough stakeholders, there would be a lot of untapped potential because of all the wrangling we have to do now to sort it out. Like if we had a better system, there would be a lot of like a lot more interoperability that could happen, and hopefully a lot less like resetting your password, losing your password, using it and writing down your password on a note next to your desk because it's so annoying to remember it. And I guess that's what keeps me hooked, is it seems like if we could get this right, it could make a difference. Every time I talk to a parent or whatever, they're always like, hey, have you replaced passwords yet? Because they're really bringing me down.
Well, and
It's
that's
a real
people.
usability barrier, I think, for like a lot of people, and the identity checking just gets harder and harder every year as like the security needs go up, and AI is only going to make it,
Oh yeah,
you know.
yeah. No, and it's interesting because the folks in chat are talking about like passkeys. Passkeys are a great tool. I'm technical and I didn't even understand what the heck they did until I actually jumped in and started using it. But trying to explain to someone how private and public keys work, let alone how to set it up right and make sure that you have it, and it's a tough ask. But again, as you said, like we've known for 20 years, right, that passwords are not going to cut it in the future. Um, and everyone hates to have to log in again. You have to, remember, don't ever make your password 12345. The most common password in the world is 12345, right? Because it asks so much of us and people don't care. So if you could somehow make it easier and make it so people don't have to worry about it, right? That is open. Again, the big one, as someone pointed out, though, is like it's interesting who's going to control it because government surveillance is a thing, right? But I think that is again a bigger question after you start getting the technology there and you start getting the adoption on how do we ethically handle this.
And yeah, you mentioned passkeys. Passkeys are kind of cool. It illustrates the point that I think one of the hardest things is, yeah, like terminology and evangelism. Like passkeys
Yes.
is a cool sounding word, and it's also like a bit obfuscates the underlying web standards that it makes use of. That I wish people would maybe just talk about, like WebAuthn more, which are the web standards that make sort of JavaScript interfaces that we can all use as web page authors to use some of this functionality. And passkeys are like some specific way of using that a couple companies started to evangelize. But now then we end up with like a fork in the web community of like, wait, what's the difference between passkeys and WebAuthn again? And like, I didn't even know they were the
Yeah.
same. But I would say, if we're successful in coming up with like a good set of interoperable wallet standards, then everyday web developers should be able to make web wallets that use the passkey related APIs, the WebAuthn APIs, to actually like manage the cryptographic key. Some web developers might make sense out of that, but yeah, I'm hoping that wallets would be able to make use of the WebAuthn APIs to do the cryptographic stuff. Another thing you mentioned I kind of wanted to draw back on is like, one of the things, if we control our own identifier and what it resolves to, that we can do is we can point to different verification methods. The verification method in practice a lot of times is a cryptographic key, but it's really openly designed. Like the verification method could be like, Anthony and I have a password worked out and he's going to like ask me what the password is in person, and that's how I will verify that I am who I say I am. It doesn't, a cryptographic key is only one kind of verification method. One of the other things you can do with it is basically advertise how you want to do encryption. And one of the things that could shake out of this a lot more is basically saying, hey, we might still use web servers like we use our Mastodon instances, or we might use for-profit SaaS vendors. But right now we give them all of our like raw data, and they either can like sell it later or leak it later or get hacked later. But if we can bring our own identifiers to these services that also have it's called a key agreement scheme, that usually is how you bootstrap into encryption. And so I think any sort of ecosystem going towards this wallet path can eventually work in a way where users only have to store encrypted data with the service provider. And I think like that limits the extent to which the service provider can either sell the whole data set or like leak it.
Right, yeah.
So I think in general, for a safety reason, we need to be moving towards an internet where we're sort of doing like privacy by design. We're not putting plain text data in places if it doesn't need to be, because it's almost inevitable that, especially in hobbyist ecosystems, that these servers are going to like that data is not in practice going to be private just because you put it behind a server's firewall. We need to move towards more of like a signal model where we're only sharing what we need to share, which is in practice a lot of times encrypted data. And that's something that controlling your own identity puts you in charge of exactly like what the encryption scheme would be, or what the key is.
Yeah. I mean, I just imagine like if you get this working and people pick up on it, like, my kids are young kids, and having a digital ID with them. And I mean, we have a social security number, right? Like our work history exists in the government. They know about your work history. They know about your taxes. They know about where you live, et cetera, et cetera. So we already kind of have these, but they're all disconnected. But then if it's like, oh, so-and-so is running for Congress. I see that you looked at, an adult website in 20 years because we hacked your digital ID. It brings up a lot of questions, but it's also very much needed. So
I hope so. And frankly, I'm happy to be a part of this.
I know you probably want to hear what happened next on the show, but the following section is only available on the Fediverse. These uploads to big tech platforms such as YouTube, they're just to spread awareness about the Fedi. They were never supposed to be the official way for you to watch the show anyway. So go on and get the full episode on video.firesidefedi.live. It is absolutely free, just a different website. This video will now continue from a bit later in the conversation.
I think this is one of the first interactions that you and I had together. I don't remember. You reached out to me about something and you're like, here, I think you should check this out. And you gave me the link, I believe, to the GDC 25, the global, what was it?
Global digital.
And watching that video, like there's a lot of really big countries, and we don't see it because we're average people in the country, but there are some really big movements in these countries. Like we're kind of sick and tired of what's going on in tech. We need to break away. Here's a good way where not only can we break away, but we can really lead the industry in these kinds of things, because it doesn't exist right now. And again, we can all agree this needs to exist.
And yeah, I think it's going to exist. For me, my worry is like whether the Fediverse and ActivityPub will be a part of it or not. And so I think that the larger context here is, right now the only choices people have, whether it's Mastodon or even Blue Sky, involve even the cryptographic keys being owned by either Blue Sky or the Mastodon instance. I think the way things are going outside of social media is more towards where we have our identities controlled by like mobile wallets, which social media ecosystem is going to rise to the occasion of having a plan for this sort of user-controlled identity. Because right now it's not clear what both Blue Sky and Mastodon are not meeting the challenge.
Take your word for it. I said, I'll take your word for it. I mean, you obviously don't wait. I mean, the only thing that I use to authenticate myself, like, is on my my own cast. Like you use, you send a message to your Mastodon, and then you take that number that you get and you put it into Owncast, and then you have authenticated against your instance. It is a solution. It is very much not a good solution. And again, we should be able to log into our systems once in the day and then not have to worry about that kind of stuff. And again, outside of even the web, your phone, your banking, your work, like this is very complex. Where does it stand right now? Where do you want, where's it going to go in the near future?
So yeah, wallet attached storage is progressing. It's a project at Digital Credentials Consortium. There's a spec at wallet.storage/spec. I mentioned some of these applications that are being built to prove it out. That's like the resume builder and stuff. Those are all on GitHub and progressing, and people can like follow this repo. I think you should have Dimitri Zagadulin come on to talk about that question, and like also social group, who's the chair there, but that's someone I've been working with and maybe can speak more to like where it's going. I can say personally, I'm exploring some adjacent use cases around like taking this data space server and using it for like website hosting and publishing. And we're ourselves are talking about where this should go. But we basically want to make sure we have this proof of concept working for this learning use case. And then we might start a W3C community group, or maybe we could go to an existing one like credentials community group or something, but we don't want to do that until we can show that it works. But the most important thing is we're trying to get this into the Open Wallet Foundation, open source wallets at the Linux Foundation, and that's like really where the action is happening right now. But if anyone wants to learn more about it, reach out or tweet at me, and we can link to more of the GitHub repos for people to follow along.
So this is one of the reasons I actually started this show, that I absolutely love about this is to you, this is a normal day, just dealing with this stuff. And you blow me away. This is amazing. I was always so afraid. Like, I would sign up for those RSS lists as a kid and I would read the information, but I was always so afraid of jumping in and actually having conversations with people. You just jumped in and now here you are going to the UN, like rubbing shoulders with folks at a W3C and Open Wallet Foundation and all these things. This is amazing stuff. This is incredible.
Yeah, everyone else should get in there and like contribute too, because one thing you learn when you jump in is that like there's a lot of room for improvement, and like there's not actually that many people, there's not that many voices that actually, or a very diverse set of voices. So more people should get in there and tell me how we're messing up and like what we should do better.
And it's open to the world, right? Someone in another country could be like, hey, this system sounds great for your country, but in our country we use this or something like that.
Yeah, that's what's really exciting about, I think, that global digital collaboration movement that like was bootstrapped in Geneva was, it's really clear that these standards are going to matter all over the world, that there is a lot of untapped potential if we can agree to them, because they have applications not just for social media, not just for students in the workplace. They have applications for like supply chain security and the enforcement of international sanctions, international trade. Like you see shipping companies presenting there on how they're going to be scanning documents to make sure that the steel is really steel. Like everything needs an identity in the supply chain, and if we can come up with a way of identifying and credentialing it, then like there's a lot of use cases that would like to use it. And sometimes I also have the same reaction where I'm like, what the heck? I thought we were just doing like social media, but it turns out, especially once you pull on the thread of identity and authentication, you get beyond just social media and into like Internet of Things, contract signing, legal engineering, and I think that's really exciting. But social media is only the tip of the iceberg in terms of where the web is going.
Did you have a clue that when you started reading those RSS and you jumped into it, that you'd be working on something that could be like at a global scale technology?
So honestly, yes. Like
one
of the talks I was giving 2 years ago is like the 15-year history of Web 3.0 social. Because like 15 years ago, I was reading about Web 3 in a very different way than my job at Web 3 Storage was talking about it 2 years ago. And people were talking about the semantic web of documents, web of data, like Internet of Things was starting to become a topic, but people were talking about how are we going to do e-governance. So a lot more of a heady time. And yeah, like that was in the discourse. That's part of one of the reasons it seemed interesting. And I'm really grateful to all the people like back then that were sort of ideating in the open on where this could go, because it does influence people's careers.
So anyone that studied any kind of history, like history is cyclical, right? So in technology, we've had this history of big systems going to little systems, going to big systems, going to little systems, right? And I'm hoping we're shifting back to that. And it seems like a lot of countries are interested now in these open platforms in order to take back their digital sovereignty. And the only way that even small countries are going to be able to do this is if they support open standards. Majority of countries in the world do not have the capital in their entire annual budget of all of their citizenry to even do something like this. But open standards allows them to be a main player on these kinds of fields. And I'm hoping we really are just going through a unique, turbulent period of history, and we come out on the other side and the web is united on all these kinds of different open standards. If anyone once again comes up and can build enough power that they take over, they are still restricted on what they could do, because these kinds of things cannot be controlled by a specific for-profit company. These have to be controlled for the betterment of society. Like, just the idea of my social security number being, fully controlled by Experian somehow is horrifying. Like, that is me. That is my identity. I should be able to have a say in how this stuff works. And right now we've gotten the technology so corporatized, so capitalized that you literally your livelihood, you could be a YouTuber and make thousands of dollars per month, and then all of a sudden that identity is gone because they don't like you anymore.
Yeah. And yeah, like in the international trade context, I mean, you really have a lot of like reasonable mutual distrust, and people are, but also mutual self-interest to use these standards. But even at the standards level, sometimes things change. And so like what I feel like where people really have trust is in the cryptography, like some of these basic digital signature algorithms. And what makes sense for people to do is build on that, and at the last minute adapt to protocols like activitypub or Blue Sky. If you design your systems right and you're just using the underlying cryptography, you don't have to pick a protocol to build on, because you can always like translate it to that at the last minute. And so even especially in these high stakes situations where there's not a lot of built-in trust, the only thing people can trust is the cryptography. And so I think that's why in the international stage, people are moving to cryptographic wallets, even if in the context of like English speaking social media, we don't feel like we need.
But you talk about trust, and we talk about where we're at with AI. It's impossible to tell what picture is real and what picture is fake anymore. There's a website out there, like, how good can you pick between a real and a fake picture? With something like this too, if I'm a photographer, that picture can point back to my digital identity, and I could say, yes, that is my picture.
Yeah, we basically, I mean, that's a lot. There's a project, there's a lab at Stanford I was like sort of working with in my last job called the Starling Lab that was trying to popularize a lot of this timestamping technology. Open timestamps is a thing in the Bitcoin community that people use for this type of thing. But the general idea is if we can empower our, photographers and whatnot to like take a photo, and before they ever put it on the internet, put their name next to it and maybe a license, copyright license, really nice, and then hash that and sign it. All they have to do is maybe like put that somewhere to to record that this data existed. They don't necessarily ever have to share it. But if later there's ever like an IP dispute or a provenance issue of whether this was real or not, then the photographer can be like, see that big like gibberish I put on the timestamp server or blockchain like 10 years ago? I can prove that I have the pre-image to that, and that's the general idea of how a lot of like content.
Are we finally coming back to the point where blockchain isn't a dirty word, and we actually can agree that it has some valid use cases, not just to make everyone richer?
Unfortunately, there's some people at like members of the W3C that cannot agree with that, and so they will like object to you use the word blockchain in it, and so it is unfortunately like pragmatic to not ever use that word in the context. Encourage those people to revisit chain. I also think that
chain of trust instead. Let's not call it blockchain. Call it chain of trust.
Trust is a good term, and to be clear, I don't think we necessarily need like big blockchains with global consensus.
No.
But it turns out if we give everyone a personal data store that also has like tamper-proof evidence that it wasn't tampered with, it's kind of like giving every person their own ledger, like micro ledger, their own kind of blockchain. But it's not like we all need to agree on what the blockchain says. We just need to like let people stitch their updates together in a similar way.
I'll finally have something to do with all those 8 pictures that I bought.
Well, and more importantly, we need more people running these like timestamp services, whether they're for-profit or non-profit, for providing this like verifiable witnessing of data. That's something that with the rise of generative AI, there is going to be a lot more synthetic data. And like, I'd hope with what we're doing with this sort of like standardizing ways of doing hashing, signing over the hash data, if we can standardize this, then it might enable services like better timestamping services for artists and creators. I would, if anyone wants to work on that with me, like that's a use case that is important. Project Liberty and Open Timestamps are other projects that are working on probably like better timestamping services in the short run.
So you're working on all of these open standards, and you've talked about working with different colleges. Are you? Can I ask who you work for that is paying for this work?
I mean, listen, I mean, as freelance, the wallet storage work has been funded through the Digital Credential Consortium at MIT.
Okay.
And then they have funds from, for example, like Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Walmart Foundation, different funders in a broader movement towards interoperable learning and employment records, which you could like Google about. So I have a tiny amount of funding trickling down to like program these standards. Before that, I was working as a full-time employee for Protocol Labs and working on Web3 storage. That was how I paid the bills.
Okay. No, because it's interesting, because a lot of times people don't know what is out there in order to even try to tackle something like this, right? Like developers still need to eat. They still need to be paid. People that have these conversations on literal worldwide scale protocols get paid.
I wouldn't say that like I haven't found a way of making like a competitive salary with students. This one, like, let me know. I think I actually would share some good advice that I got when I showed up to the social web working group in like 2014 from the W3C staff contact, who was like, you know, I got some advice from this person RMS that was like, it's okay to have your activism and your day job be separate. Don't feel like you have to merge them. It's a good way of burning yourself out or like going broke. You know,
yeah.
It's okay to just do volunteer work and not have it be your identity or your job, like how you feed your family. So I consider this in the category of like not paid very well, but it's a good way of learning. It's a good way of like working with people who are smarter than me, and if we're lucky, it might make something useful for other people and keep the ball going.
Yeah, this is amazing stuff. And yes, I would absolutely love to have Dimitri on, and anyone else you recommend. I'll have to obviously hit you up after this to get his information. I know you talked about Dimitri before. Is there anything else that you're working on that's completely world altering, amazing stuff? Or is this it? You know, just a little thing.
They're not. I think are not that comes to mind. I think that's nice of you to say. And yeah, I'm happy that any of this is like interesting to you. It's only possible. It's surprisingly hard to find people in person that will care about any of this, and it's really nice to have
it's amazing
in the Fediverse to like meet people to jam on this and get more ideas. So thanks for connecting me to your community and for like talking about some of these ideas.
Yeah, no, thank you. And again, this is one of those things where, and I know I was kind of jesting about the whole solid competition, right? But a lot of times people in these open source fields working on these things, as you said, you're not doing this for the money. You're doing it because you want someone to do it, and we can all kind of agree it needs done. And this might not be the answer, but at least it is moving towards hopefully an answer. You are learning from it. You're seeing what works, more importantly, what doesn't work. And at the end, you know, they might converge into something wholly brand new, or technology might have moved on to something else. And I feel like people look at open source technology and like, well, that's never going to work. Why bother? And it's like, because it still builds on each other, right? If you have any kind of interest, just go for it.
Yeah, and I frankly would love to build on that slightly to say there's a lot of ways of doing any of the technical stuff here. There's a lot of ways of standardizing any of it. I think right now there's a lot of momentum in the social ecosystem to be like, oh, let's work more on standards. Let's all get a bureaucracy together to decide what we should decide later. But then a lot of these discussions are just speculative about what we would standardize. They're not really based on like proof of concepts that do or don't work for specific populations. It's just sort of power politics on what the bureaucracy wants to fiat. So I would like, in general, we're also trying to just show how you can go experiment and make something cool. You don't have to do it in the standards group, but you will actually indirectly be helping standardization efforts by working on something with like a discrete name with good new ideas and like in a specific context that the standards groups can then point to as like evidence as to whether the technical idea is going to work, not just let's all sit in a room and like speculate on whether this is a good idea. Like we want to be grounding these technical standardization discussions in prior art, real world tests, and not just like whoever speaks the loudest or has the most privilege in the room to fiat into something.
But you don't have to be technical either to be a part of these groups, right?
Totally. Like, frankly, what I mean even by the kind of testing I'd like to see more of before we get to standardization is everyday people using this in a user interface so that it actually makes sense to them.
Right.
So often we would be deciding, like, what should the JSON property be in this wire protocol? But like, that's so much less important what data flows over the wire than like, how is this going to make sense to a user? And all of that stuff I'd love to see happening pre-standardization, and too often it isn't. And then we standardize things that aren't going to work because they weren't actually based on any sort of like data or user testing. They were based on a highly paid person's opinion.
That's the thing that so many people discount. Like, yes, your end user experience really matters, because if it doesn't make sense to you and we can't get you to understand to use it, then if no one's using it, it doesn't matter. Right? Like, everyone's thoughts on this are useful in some way. And it's interesting of how many folks are like, well, I can't contribute because I'm not technical. You don't have to be technical. Like, literally, I did a video on someone's game a couple of weeks ago, and they're like, oh, that's how people are doing this. Like, just seeing and interacting with it helps folks create it, because they want to create the best application possible so that it gets used.
And one thing I find is we don't get the design innovation that we should be having if we aren't, well, this is maybe opinionated, but like, what designers need to like make good interoperable designs is a clear specification for what it needs to do to interoperate. And I think a lot of the ecosystem right now doesn't necessarily operate according to anyone. Even the ActivityPub spec, it's like random combinations of other stuff Mastodon does. And so we have this problem where we can't get design innovation on a coherent spec because what everyone does isn't even what the spec says. And so designers have to choose between implementing what the protocol says to do or doing what is needed to interoperate with some of our implementations. And maybe I'm rambling, but that's something I think we're 22 on, is like, designers don't know what to implement, whether they should reverse engineer Mastodon or implement what the spec says. And that's also holding back what we as users get to use in terms of well-designed interfaces.
Well, and even if it's something that you think you understand, you might not. We've had Bluetooth for how many years now? It's like 20 years or something for Bluetooth, right? Any given person out there, the last Bluetooth device that you used, did it work perfectly? You always have some kind of issue with Bluetooth because it's an open spec. And there's so many people that are like, oh, I can implement this, and then don't ask questions and don't fully understand how it works. It's okay to go and ask questions too about the spec. And a lot of times it's not malicious, right? It's, as you're saying, it is interpretation of the spec. And you think it's saying one thing, and in reality, it's saying something else. And it's not embarrassing. It's okay. You can go ask. But one of the things that I always think about with something like this, which at Fedi Forum in a week and a half, which I'm very excited about, is that you have conversations with people to see how they might use it even in the future. The way that I look at this is Star Trek. Not like the morals and whatnot, but Star Trek, when it came out, it launched a lot of people's imagination into what the future should look like. And then a lot of people went out and was like, I want to make this a reality. Hell, opening and closing doors automatically. When Star Trek came out, that wasn't a thing. And like you need those kind of dreamers too, of like, oh, you can use this in this instance. It's like, wow, we've never thought about that. That seems like a great use case. I was like trying to daydream what the world could look like if something like this comes out. And I'm doing that. I plan on doing that at Fedi Forum with what does a world look like that is powered by ActivityPub? Like, even having people come to one of your meetings and being like, have you thought about it this way, is useful to you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And like a big way, not non-technical, I hate the whole notion of non-technical, but the really good way that people can contribute who don't want to program computers is writing and even ideating on some of these use cases. Like the way even the social web working group got started that led to ActivityPub was first writing just some sketches, like one paragraph or less, on the core use cases, the linked web storage working group is going through that right now, I think. And that's like a really high leverage way for everyday people to get involved and just say, hey, like, I want you technical people to spend the next 2 years solving this. And it's really valuable to the protocol designers to be able to point to something they didn't suggest as a use case and be like, I'm designing for this. So that's one, if people are like, I have a vision for how, the web would work powered by ActivityPub, or powered by decentralized identity and some combination of Fediverse protocols. Just write a blog post about it and like share it on the social community group mailing list, or just on Mastodon, or both. And that could really like ripple through and inspire some protocol designer or something to like take a stab at it and start a dialogue where you're actually making a real help. Sometimes it really is the constraint as having a good use case with a real person attached to it who can help you understand it. There's plenty of ways of doing the technical parts, not enough.
What's the best way for folks to help get involved with that outside of like pinging you on Mastodon, which I'll have a link in the video?
Basically, I think if you search for W3C social CG, and we'll make sure there's a link at the bottom here, that's how you can join the social web community group at W3C. That has had a lot of activity recently. There is a new charter as of 6 months ago. There looks like there's maybe motion towards there being another working group at W3C to like add on to ActivityPub and some of these other standards. And now, if you get in there, your voice can count. You'll see a lot of discussion and proposals as they come through, and you can just reply via email. So that's where people should get involved, in my opinion. We need more new eyes and energized people to come and participate there.
Awesome. This is great. Sorry if I've been asking or just rambling. Like, these kinds of ideas always excite me because, again, I don't want Google or X or Facebook or whoever is next to own my kid's digital future. I don't like, yes, the person at the top might be a saint, but they still have to hire people underneath them. And this type of power can absolutely corrupt anyone. Like, that's
the good news is we have like a lot more affordances than we used to. And so like if you're curious, explore TIDS, like get a domain name if you don't already have one, or ask your friend to give you a subdomain. It's like as long as we keep control over the names that we use for ourselves and our friends and family online, like we have a lot of flexibility. It's only once we start handing out a name at like instance.com that we don't control the DNS of that.
Yeah.
And we don't know how it's funded. That's when you've sort of given away your power. So my one advice is like, if you've never had a domain name before, like maybe choose one that you can have for the rest of your life and point to these different services as they come and go, and you'll be better off than a lot of people.
All right. Well, now for the real reason I asked Ben here is to give him the opportunity to win a prize of a lifetime.
I'm excited.
Our prize today is the very popular book that all big tech CEOs have read throughout the ages, How to Act Like Your Software is Open Source. And then once you have enough power, you make it proprietary. Everyone knows that book, obviously. Written by the world's largest douchebags that founded or control such companies as Twitter, Google, and Microsoft. And we see how successful they are, so obviously it must work. Thought about getting you anything else in the world other than the very famous and popular How to Act Like Your Software is Open Source, and then once you have enough power to make it proprietary. But we know this open source thing is really not going to work, so I figured we just help you out and get you the book. Are you ready for the quiz, Ben?
Yeah, I'm excited.
All right.
I need this book.
Favorite movie, and why is it Spaceballs?
Wait, can you say it again?
Favorite movie, and why is it Spaceballs?
I haven't even seen Spaceball.
So what's your favorite movie?
I like Interstellar a lot. I don't know if it's my favorite movie, but I like Interstellar. I like Interstellar. Good themes, good time travel themes.
Interstellar is a great movie. I have no issues with that. That is a wonderfully good movie. Okay. I like that answer. Good job. That's what matters, is what I like. So I've gotten into the habit of asking people about what their favorite cuisine is from their country. And we're both American, so obviously we have the greatest cuisine in the world. And a couple of the items that I found when you look up famous cuisine from America, such things as French fries, which freedom fries, please, or donuts, or of course the very famous deep fried butter. Which is your favorite in our amazing delicacy from America of those three?
Can I think outside? Can I choose something else that's not
Go
one?
ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
I'm like reminded of like, man, can I just have some like corned beans and squash? That's what like the indigenous folks used to base their diet around before all that garbage got part of the diet. But the Three Sisters that was like the base of the American diet before those ones came along, I think was more like corned beans and squash. So I choose that. I think that's like more American food than fried donuts.
All right. I've never heard of the Three Sisters, to be honest with you. That shows you our American education system. Okay.
They taught us that in Kansas growing up, and like, I don't know. I always
Maybe that's why. Okay. Next question is red, green, or blue?
Good question. Blue, green.
Okay. Why green?
Green, I don't know. I've just been drawn to green. It's like colors of plants and shrubs, and it's like there's too much red and blue divisiveness. So I've been finding myself just wearing a lot of green recently. Like, reminds me of the earth.
So if I start a political party, well, no, I guess there already is the Green Party. Yeah. All right. Next question is, what does an alternate universe Ben do?
I think alternate universe Ben would have like not dropped out of college 15 years ago and maybe been like in grad school for a long time or something. That definitely would have been a very different path if I wouldn't have come out here in 2010 and stayed in Kansas for 3 or 4 or 5 more years or stayed in academia. So alternate universe Ben would probably be like a lifer art student or something.
Art student.
I was something completely different. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, that is very different.
I like to read some like good old like avant-garde art theory.
I reached out to an alternate universe. I have an alternate universe phone here. It changes shape from week to week. Don't try to figure it out. It's very technical. But I contacted an alternate universe, and the Ben that I got in that alternate universe says he also works on wallet storage. But when I asked him to describe wallet storage, he said he actually takes wallets from other people and stores them in his own pocket. And I thought that sounded like pickpocketing, but I don't know his universe. So alternate universe, Ben, best of luck with wallet storage.
Thank you so much.
All right.
An evil goatee.
Since, well, we didn't even talk about it, so this kind of doesn't line up. Webfinger. I saw people in chat talking about Webfinger, right?
That's the thing, yeah.
So if we have Webfinger, then our next question is head, shoulders, knees, or toes?
My daughter sings a song a lot right now. So she likes all of them. Toes. No, that's not right. I'm gonna go knees. I'm gonna go knees on that one.
Okay, why knees?
I had an old mentor that was like, your knees are really important. Go to the doctor if they start hurting. Once they start breaking down, you'll really regret it. So I don't know. I guess I had advice to take my knees really seriously. Oh.
I was concerned you would say toes because I'm just not into the toes. Can't do the toes.
Also not particularly. As much as some.
All right. Well, the last question, as usual, will be sent to Ben telepathically. I'll send you the question. I'll let you know that I sent it. I mean, you'll obviously know because you're telepathic, but for audio listeners, it helps them know that I sent it. Take your time on the question. It's always very complex and difficult. So take your time. You ready for the, on your notice, I'll send it. Okay, here it comes. All right, there's your question. I know it's a very big, broad question.
Yeah, I think the answer is Xanadu.
Xanadu. Okay, why Xanadu?
Oh, I thought I was just going to get to leave a rosebud or something.
Yeah, that one always catches people off guard. Why?
I guess fine. The question I got from you was, what should have, like, what one old web Fediverse thing should people go read about? And I was going to suggest that people go read about Ted Nelson's Xanadu project, which was like a precursor to the web before Timble came around, and had a lot of cool ideas around sharing content around and site that we could bring to the web, but is not currently there. So that's some stuff a friend and I have been kicking around recently.
I really like this because I don't know if you know, but Xanadu is also a movie.
I'm familiar with the movie Citizen Kane.
Okay.
What movie are you talking about? What movie?
Xanadu.
Oh, the documentary about Xanadu?
No, there was like a sci-fi movie, Xanadu, right? Sorry. 1980 American musical fantasy film written by Richard Christian Dennis. I don't know. I've never seen it. I thought you were talking about that, but you're talking about, what was it?
Basically, like one of the precursor hypertext projects before Tim Berners-Lee like ended up making the web, but like 5 or 10 years before, was this guy Ted Nelson, who was trying to find the best possible software for making screenplays and films and like stories, and he came up with this whole like cool ideas around hypertext that in some ways the web realized, but in many ways have not. And it's just like really good nerd rabbit hole on the adjacent possible we have with the web. That one of the small connection is one of the editors on the authorization scheme we're using in wallet storage, which is from the W3C credentials community group, is this guy, Mark Miller. And when he was 19, he was the lead programmer on this project, Xanadu. And so some of the authorization ideas that we're implementing in wallet storage go all the way back from before Tim Berners-Lee was making the web, all the way back to this Xanadu thing, where they were really thinking about how we could mix and match media online, but also extend privileges and authorization about who's allowed to remix stuff. When stuff is quoted on one website, how do people find their way back to the place it was quoted from? Some new features for Mastodon are like, who's authorized to quote me or not? Well, that was like essentially a feature that was part of Xanadu back then. So
okay,
I'm happy to know about that, so I can like give you
more
ancient reading, but it's good inspiration for like web developers.
Yeah, no, I didn't know this one. I did. Have you ever seen The Mother of All Demos?
Yeah. And yeah.
That's what made me, I immediately thought of that once I started looking up Xanadu, and that's...
Douglas Engelbart and Ted Nelson were talking a lot around that time. And so there's a little bit of a link there.
All right, nice. Well, congratulations. You got every answer either correct or incorrect. Congratulations. Good job. Unfortunately, we weren't, when we were attempting to send you the very popular book, How to Act Like Your Software is Open Source, and then once you have enough power, you make it proprietary, apparently Elon Musk intercepted the package. And since he said he was attempting to follow it, but he actually can't read, so he's just doing whatever he wants, which is very apparent. So you're not going to be able to get that book unless you want to go take Sir Tim Berners-Lee with you and go tackle Elon Musk. I would say, as usual, that we'd punish the person responsible for not getting your prize, but I'm sure Elon is going to help that by punishing all of us by saying anything else in the world that we all just facepalm at. On that note, Ben, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you coming. This has been mind-blowing stuff that has been just absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for all the amazing work that you're doing on it.
Thanks, Anthony. Yeah, thanks for listening and for letting me talk about it and sort of iterate on some of these ideas. It already helped me quite a bit. So thank you.
Yeah, this has been great. And for everyone out on the Fediverse, thank you all so much out there. You guys really all make it worthwhile. It's, as we said, everyone's view is totally unique and can help in some way. The only reason the Fediverse is still kicking right now and is here is because we're all here on it. And as long as we keep, just using it and spreading the word to others, it's not going anywhere. We're just going to help more folks bring back the freedom to all of us and out of these walled gardens. But that's all we have for today. Thank you all so much. We'll catch you in the next episode. Have a good one.